Today on Sugar Spun Run, we'll be making chocolate peanut butter sandwich cookies. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and today I am sharing a simple recipe for peanut butter and chocolate sandwich cookies. Maybe you've seen these before, they've been on the blog for a couple of years now. They're one of my personal favorites, and since I'm trying to get a video made for every single post, I figured it was about time I do these. Now to begin, you're going to want to go ahead and preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, grab yourself a medium-large, microwave-safe bowl. Now the first ingredient you're going to need is 1/2 cup or 1 stick of unsalted butter. We're going to add this to our bowl. And as you probably guessed, we're going to be heating this in the microwave in just a second. So to help the butter melt nicely and evenly, I'm just going to cut it into about tablespoon-sized pieces. Next, you will need 2 cups of semi-sweet chocolate chips. We will add these in with our butter. Now we'll head over to the microwave and we're going to heat these in 30-second intervals, and you want to stir after every 30 seconds until the chocolate and butter are completely melted and your mixture is smooth. You do want to make sure you're stopping every 30 seconds because if you heat up the chocolate too much too fast, what's going to happen is it's going to seize and it's going to get grainy. It's not going to work for your cookies. All right, well, this is beautiful. Everything's nicely combined, but at this point, your chocolate mixture is likely pretty hot. So you don't want to add your sugars right away because if you do, this mixture is going to melt your sugars and your cookie dough is going to be too runny, too greasy. Your cookies will spread all over the pan. So we're going to need to have a little bit of patience here. Give yourself about 10 minutes, let the chocolate butter mixture cool down a bit. And then once it's cooled, we can now add our sugars. You're going to need 3/4 cup of firmly packed light brown sugar. We'll also be adding 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. All right, now stir your sugars into your chocolate mixture. You want to get everything nicely combined so you don't see any lumps of brown sugar or anything. Nice, well combined chocolate batter. So my last job before I became a full-time blogger, which is a weird job, but it does exist, I used to do cancer research at a hospital. And all of the people I worked with, the dietitian, the speech pathologist, the nurses, they used to love these cookies. This was probably my most highly requested recipe to bring in. So the next thing we need to grab is 2 large eggs plus 1 large egg yolk. The extra yolk helps make the cookies nice and tender and chewy. Ideally, these should be at room temperature, and ideally you would also lightly scramble them before you add them to your batter. I'm just going to add them now and just use my spatula to just break up the yolks a little bit. So that's the main idea. You want to make sure the yolks are nicely beaten up. All right, and before we go any further, we'll also add our vanilla extract. You're just going to need a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Stir the eggs into the batter. The chocolate mixture is going to be a little bit thick, so it's going to take a little bit of an arm workout, but you've got this. It's not that difficult. And you just want to stir until everything is nicely combined. You don't want to have any of those thick streaks of the chocolate cookie batter. You just want it to be a nice, smooth batter. All right, once that's nice and glossy and well combined, we'll just scoot that aside. We're going to grab a separate bowl for our dry ingredients. We'll start with 1½ cups of all-purpose flour. And we'll add 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder. I am using natural cocoa powder today. A teaspoon of cornstarch, which again helps make the cookies nice and chewy. A 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 3/4 teaspoon of salt. We'll just whisk these together until everything is nicely combined and there are no lumps left from the cocoa powder. Now we'll stir this into our other ingredients. I'm just going to use my spatula to stir everything together until it's completely combined. And your batter might have started to stiffen up a little bit while it was sitting. That's completely fine. Just work it a little bit with the spatula. It'll all come together. So now we're ready to start baking our cookie dough. Now to portion it, I am going to be using a 2 teaspoon-sized cookie scoop. I'm going to portion the dough so it's slightly heaping in the scoop. We'll just drop that on a parchment paper-lined baking sheet. And if you want to make your cookies nice and round, you can take the dough and just gently form it into a nice smooth ball in your palms. It's not necessary, it just makes our cookies a little bit rounder, it makes them a little bit more uniform, a little bit neater. And even if you don't want to roll the dough between your palms, I do recommend that after you drop your cookie dough onto your sheet like this, you just want to kind of use your fingers and semi-form it into a ball. That way your cookies aren't going to look crazy and like amoebas. You do want to give your cookies a little bit of breathing room on the baking sheet because they are going to spread as they bake. These should be pretty thin cookies when they're finished baking, so to help encourage them to flatten just a little bit more, I like to take my fingers and just gently press down on each cookie dough ball. Make that one a little bit more round. We'll take these over to our 350 Fahrenheit preheated oven, where they're going to need to bake for about 9 to 10 minutes. You don't want to over bake them. You want the cookies to be nice and soft even once they've cooled completely. So if they seem slightly underdone in the middle when you pull them out of the oven, that's totally fine. We're going to let them cool completely on the baking sheet and they'll finish cooking all the way through there, but they'll still be nice and chewy when they cool. So these two cookies up front are the ones that we rolled into smooth balls. As you can see, these honestly turned out pretty nicely too. They're a lot more uniform than I actually expected them to be. We'll see how the next batches turn out. So it's up to you if you want to roll them between your palms or how you want to spend your time. So while your cookies are cooling, we can go ahead and make our peanut butter filling, which is my favorite part of this recipe. You're going to need a large bowl. We're going to combine 1.5 cups of creamy peanut butter, 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and you do want this to be softened, at least to be near room temperature. And we'll just cream together the butter and the peanut butter until the mixture is nice and smooth and creamy. Next, we'll add our sugar. We're going to be using 1.5 cups of powdered sugar for this recipe. Basically, the peanut butter filling is like a peanut butter frosting, except it's thicker than your average frosting. Really stuck together. All right, now we're going to, I would recommend beginning to mix this together with your mixer on low speed. This mixer doesn't really have a low speed option. It just goes crazy right from the beginning. So I'm going to start by combining everything with my spatula, and then I'll switch over to the mixer. Trying to catch some of that loose powdered sugar, that way I don't end up wearing it. Now we could switch over to our mixer, but at this point everything's actually beginning to get combined, so I'm going to go ahead and add our vanilla extract, and you will need 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And we can also add our milk, or at least some of it. Now the exact amount of milk you're going to need is going to most likely vary. So for starters, we're just going to add 2 tablespoons of milk, and we'll add more if needed. About 2 tablespoons. And because we have most of our sugar absorbed, I'm going to switch back over to my mixer, try not to spill anything, and beat everything together until it's nice and creamy. Now you can stop adding milk to your frosting at whatever consistency best suits you. If you want a thicker, fudgier frosting, you can stop right now. You probably won't be able to pipe it on. You'll probably need to scoop it on with a spoon, but that would be totally fine. I'm looking for something that's a little bit closer to a frosting, even if we're not quite that thin. I want it to be a little bit silkier, and I want to pipe my frosting onto my cookies. So I'm gonna thin this out a little bit more. I'm gonna add another 2 tablespoons of milk. We'll see how that looks. This is still just a little bit thick for my liking, so I'm just gonna add another tablespoon of milk. All right, so this is the consistency that I like my filling to be. Again, it's not too thin, it's definitely not as thin as my peanut butter frosting, but it's going to be easy enough to pipe. Now, if you don't want to pipe your frosting, you could just spread it onto the underside of your cookie, but I'm going to place mine in a piping bag. You can use any piping tip you'd like. This is a larger Attico 848 piping tip. As you guys might know if you've been watching a lot of my videos, this is my favorite tip. Say you can use any tip, but you do want to make sure the opening's fairly wide, otherwise you're going to be squeezing really hard to get the frosting out. So you want to make sure that you're not adding this peanut butter filling while your cookies are still warm, because it will completely melt it. You'll have a runny mess on your hands. So make sure your cookies have cooled completely. And then we're also going to pair off our cookies. This is pretty simple here because I'm only showing you 1 baking sheet worth, but you want to make sure that you have 2 cookies that are about the same size. See, these are a little uneven, wouldn't be a deal breaker, but instead I'm going to pair these 2 together. All right, now we'll grab our filling, and if you're using a piping bag, hopefully you were a little bit neater than I was because I made a huge mess of this. And we are just going to pipe some of this onto the underside of one of our cookie pairs, or one side of our cookie pairs. Gently press down. There we go. So that was pretty easy. Now, one thing that you can do to be a little bit extra, as the kids are saying these days, is you could melt some chocolate, either chocolate chips or dark chocolate melting wafers, and then take the cookie and dip it halfway in the bowl of melted chocolate, just so you have a cookie with a nice little jacket of chocolate. It makes them a little extra rich. It's really good. If you've seen the photos that I have on my blog, that's what I did for all of the cookies in those photos. Today I am not going to be extra. I'm just going to settle for these delicious cookies as they are. And I hope you really enjoyed today's recipe. if you try this one out, I would love to know what you think of it. It is one of my all-time favorites with or without the chocolate. So thank you guys so much for watching, and if you tried this one, please leave me a comment. Thanks guys, I'll see you next time. They're so good.